This podcast does not provide medical advice. Please listen to the complete disclosure at the end of the recording.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Everyone Dies, the podcast, where we talk about serious illness, dying, death, and bereavement. I'm Marianne Matza. I'm a nurse practitioner, and I'm going to use my 43 years of nursing experience to help you understand what happens at the end of life.
And I'm Charlie Navarrete, an actor in New York City, here to ask questions that might pop into your head while listening to our podcast. If they pop in later, go to our website. Marianne and I are here because we believe that the more you know, the better prepared you are to make difficult decisions about your health when you are not under pressure or comatose.
Yeah, it's easier when you're not comatose.
Yes.
So please relax, get yourself something nourishing to eat and drink, or just have cake. I don't care.
Let them
And
eat
thank
cake.
you.
Yes.
And thank you for spending the next hour with Charlie and me. In the first half, we will report about Meatloaf's death and our recipe of the week. I'll let you guess what that might be. In the second half, we are continuing our series about death with a talk about embalming. And in our third half, we have an interview with the Green Reaper, Elizabeth Fournier. So, Charlie, what's up for our first half this week?
So, how did Meatloaf die? Well, first, my mother's gravy started to get lumpy. Then eventually less and less gravy, finally resorting to gravy in a can, which eventually led to therapy around 12. Then, rather than her homemade mashed potatoes, she starts to throw in these little red potatoes, you know, the size of ping pong balls. And I'm talking about trauma here, people. And, oh, wait, my script. Oh, in my script, Meatloaf is spelled as one word. Oh, so it's the singer. Never mind. Rock superstar Meatloaf, whose Bat Outta Hell is one of the best-selling albums of all time, died in January 2022 at the age of 74. Reports say the singer and actor had recently fallen sick with COVID-19. In an emotional statement posted to Facebook, the performer's family said he was with his wife when he died and had said his final goodbye to his two daughters in the past 24 hours. He sold 100 million albums in his 5-decade career and starred in movies including Fight Club, The Rocky Horror Picture Show, and Wayne's World, and did a stint on Donald Trump's Celebrity Apprentice TV series. The family wrote in its announcement, "We know how much he meant to many of you, and we truly appreciate all of the love and support as we move through this time of grief in losing such an inspiring artist and beautiful man," adding, "From his heart to your souls, don't ever stop rocking." Meatloaf. Yeah. Meatloaf.
Rock on, baby.
Rock on. So Meatloaf, the singer, was seriously ill with COVID before his death. Regardless, the rock star was reportedly planning to attend a business dinner just days before his death to discuss a show he was working on, titled after his famous single, "I'd Do Anything for Love." According to insiders, Meatloaf never made it. The musician had to cancel dinner as his health was already deteriorating. At the time of this writing, it is unclear if Meatloaf was ever vaccinated against the virus. Just months before his death, Meatloaf said he was, quote, "scared to death of COVID," yet he claimed he'd rather die than have to deal with quarantine. During an interview with the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette from August 2021, he called face masks a nuisance. A reporter asked if he was afraid of COVID. Meatloaf replied, "Oh, I'm scared to death. You kidding me? But I'm sorry. I understand stopping life for a little while, but they cannot continue to stop life because of politics. And right now, they're stopping because of politics." When the interviewer later asked, or rather later said, "We're being controlled by everybody," Meatloaf replied, "Yeah, I know, but not me. If I die, I die, but I'm not going to be controlled." Meatloaf, we love your music.
Yes.
As an homage, our recipe of the week is, hey, Meatloaf. Because rock musician / actor Meat Loaf plays Eddie in the 1975 film The Rocky Horror Picture Show, where, and if you haven't seen this film, first, what's wrong with you? Second, and you may want to step away from your audio device for a moment, the film's main antagonist, Dr. Frank Infurter, chases Eddie into a meat locker and murders him with an ice pick. And, hopefully you haven't returned yet, but really the movie's been out since the 1970s. Dr. Frank Infurter and company eat meat loaf, a.k.a. Eddie.
What's for dinner? What's for dinner?
Meat loaf.
So if those of you who've never been to see Rocky Horror Picture Show, they have call-outs throughout the whole thing. And one of them is, what's for dinner? And everybody hollers, meatloaf.
And then, for example, if in one of the scenes, one of the actors says he would like to make a toast. And traditionally, people then just start to throw toast in the
throw toast.
It's a really, really fun time.
Yeah, we used to go when Charlie and I worked together in Ann Arbor when we were young, and we'd get off at 11:30 and
go to the midnight show
and go, and the group would go see Rocky Horror Picture Show. We did that many times.
It was fun.
It was fun. Yeah.
So
you were saying?
I don't remember.
Meatloaf.
Ah, yes. Meatloaf, also known as Eddie, the character's name, who had been turned into a kind of meatloaf. So when a corpse is revealed under the dining room table, the actors are genuinely shocked. None knew that the body was there except for actor Tim Curry, a.k.a. Dr. Frank Infurter, who whipped the tablecloths off to reveal meatloaf was for dinner. So to find the spelling of our meatloaf recipe, go to our webpage for that, plus additional resources for this program. Follow us on Facebook.
In no respect to Meatloaf the singer, that we have our recipe of the week is Meatloaf. We're doing it to honor him because we really like him.
Yes.
Oh, and can I make a public service announcement?
Sure.
In that I was just looking at the statistics. Currently, there are around 2,000 deaths a day, and about 90% of those are people over 65 years of age, overweight, and unvaccinated. So that's our public service announcement.
So follow us on Facebook and Instagram, won't you? And remember to rate and review this podcast and our spelling of meatloaf. As a licensed nonprofit organization, we are dependent on the kindness of our beloved listeners and always appreciate your donations. And hey, donations are tax deductible. Please, hello. Please go to our webpage to donate in support of our work. www.everyonedies.org. That's every, the number one dies.org. Marianne?
And we'll miss you, Meatloaf. I really did love his music. So, in our second half today, I'm going to be talking with y'all about embalming.
Oh.
Now, to embalm is to preserve a corpse from decay. Originally in ancient Egypt, it was with spices, and now we use arterial injection of a preservative. But the ancient Egyptians believed that preserving the dead in a lifelike state would allow the soul to exist for eternity. Their use of botanicals, including herbs, spices, resins, gums, and oils, was thought to increase the likelihood of resurrection. Their process of embalming took about 90 days to go through all of the steps. And I won't bore you with the steps, but who knows, at some later date I might want to bore you with them.
Put you to sleep. Okay, go ahead. If you're an insomniac, we'll tune into that episode. Okay.
Yeah. So embalming is really a custom that's used in the United States and Canada primarily that temporarily preserves a deceased body so that it'll be intact for viewing at wakes and funerals. And it was popularized for practical reasons during the Civil War to transfer fallen Yes, we're not transforming anybody today. To transfer fallen soldiers back to their homes, and without severe decomposition. So embalming went on to become the cornerstone of an industry that depends financially on the preservation and beautification of the corpse. It's also claimed that embalming protects the public health, which is false, and it helps to create a memory picture for the family, which suggests that the visual of the corpse in its natural state must be covered up, must be made up, and must be changed in some way because, God forbid, we kind of acknowledge things as they really are. A baby comes out of the uterus and it's covered with stuff and it's not really pretty, but we look at it, we say, oh, there's a baby. But when we die, it's like, oh, no, we don't want to look at that.
Yeah.
So the way in which the corpse is embalmed greatly affects the duration of the preservation. There's no public health benefit to embalming, and it's practiced purely for cosmetic purposes. However, in some places, it's prohibited to embalm a person who's died from a serious contagious disease. And so when we're recording this in the United States. And so people in the United States would say, what do you mean there's no public health benefit and you don't have to do it? I'm serious. You don't have to do it. Mm-hmm. And there is no public health benefit because if you're embalming, you're double casketing and being put, dug actually 6 foot deep and all of that. So there's no contamination in terms of, if you died from, a contagious disease, that the people in the next grave or people visiting the next grave are going to get it. That's not going to happen. It was more, like we've been talking about vampires and that kind of thing lately.
Oh my.
Well, it's because they didn't actually dig people down 6 feet and they didn't embalm. And so they went through the natural putrefaction process.
Right.
And, would sometimes pop out of their graves at, uncomfortable moments. So embalming is really an aesthetic choice as well as a practical one in terms of a family might choose embalming to give the loved one a more lifelike appearance at open casket viewing. And some families feel that seeing a loved one's body one last time as appearing as though they were asleep helps with the grieving process. And if that helps and that's what the person who died wants, then that's perfectly cool.
Yeah.
If you say to yourself, well, I don't know, I've never really thought about it. What do they do? Well, I'm going to tell you. Because I'll tell you, when I used to take my nursing students to a funeral home, and they would go through the whole process. And it was once I saw what all went on, I said, oh, I don't want that done to me. And I don't want people looking at me when I'm dead. But so there you have it. In terms of organ donation, if you're going to donate your organs, it shouldn't affect the funeral or other services. Those organs are removed before embalming and rarely delay the memorial service. Now, there can be delays between when a person dies and when they're cremated. In those instances, embalming the body is necessary to slow down decomposition. And this might happen if the person's died away from home and the body has to be transported back, like if you go on that, grand trip to Europe and something unfortunate happens, you're taking a selfie and you fall off the cliff or whatever, and your body is going to come back. They would need to embalm it because there's that delay. In some states, it's mandatory to embalm within a certain time after death. Usually it's about a week. If there is going to be an open casket service, embalming is generally desired. It's required if you're going to have any cosmetic applications where you're going to try to make your loved one look more lifelike and natural. So they can't do all that cosmetic stuff on an unembalmed body. You have to be embalmed in order to do that. So let's talk about the process. Embalming is the process by which the corpse is preserved and prepared for viewing. It's common for health reasons. It protects mourners from being in the presence of a decaying body. I mean, that would make sense. I don't think I'd want to go see that. Basically, the embalmer is a creator of illusions, of pleasant illusions which banish the traces of suffering and death and present the deceased in an attitude of normal, restful sleep. In the practice of embalming, this illusion is called a memory picture. There's no legal requirement that the body be embalmed, even if it's going to be viewed. You don't have to be embalmed to be viewed. The average cost of embalming is about $300 to $1,000. The $300, the lower end of it, is just for the embalming, and then the other $700 is for hair and makeup and stuff like that. So the process of it, the body's first cleaned and disinfected, and during that time it's massaged and flexed. And I'm thinking, oh, well, that sounds nice. I could use a massage and a flex.
Kinky if you're dead, but I'm sorry, what?
No. But this is to alleviate the rigor mortis, which is the stiffening of the body that happens a short time after death. So it's to kind of loosen up the body, make it easier to work with. Even though the rigor mortis is going to cease later, the massaging helps to postpone it or to move it along. Now, there are 4 embalming methods that are involved in injection of chemicals to preserve the body. So that's really what happens is it's a lot of chemicals. So there's arterial embalming, which injects the chemicals into the blood vessels. That's number 1. Number 2 is cavity embalming, which injects the chest and abdomen. Number 3 is hypodermic embalming, which injects under the skin. And surface embalming, that's the 4th one, is the application of chemicals in gel or liquid form to the body's surface. Now, the size of the body, age, water content, temperature, decomposition, condition of the body's blood vessels, and premortem medications, like what they were on before they died. Like they were on gentamicin, which is an antibiotic. Gentamicin inactivates embalming fluid. So that is going to affect how the embalming is going to go. This is going to dictate the solution strengths and the injection rates of the embalming chemicals. So the first, as I said, is arterial embalming. And this is the process of removing the blood from the body. So they don't leave the blood in there, Charlie. They take all the blood out. Mm-hmm. Now, an incision is made up near the collarbone and the carotid artery, which is how all the blood is pushed out of the body, and the embalming solutions are pumped into the arteries. The embalming solution is usually a combination of formaldehyde, glutaraldehyde, methanol, ethanol, phenol, and water, and may also contain dyes to simulate a lifelike skin tone. Primarily, formaldehyde and methyl alcohol are used as preservative chemicals because they change the cell proteins to prevent putrefaction. Interesting fun fact you can share with people at your next dinner party.
There you are, yes.
Embalmers inject these chemicals into the body using a centrifugal pump that pushes the fluids into the body with 5 to 10 psi of pressure. At the same time, blood and fluid are drained from the body by gravity or electrical aspirators. A pumping device that performs like the heart is used by moving the fluids through the arteries. The blood runs out of the body and into the drain and then into the sewer. The embalmer will look for evidence that the chemicals have reached the hands and face and facilitate this process by massaging and repositioning the corpse because they're moving that fluid down to where all the parts where it needs to go. When the embalming fluid reaches the hands, they'll then be placed in their final position over the chest or abdomen, and the fingers are held together using super glue. The muscles will gradually... What?
I'm just kidding. You said super glue. It's just basically just to keep the hands together?
Yeah.
So to not float. Okay, I got it. All right.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, they don't glue them until
fingers,
after
I meant fingers, yeah. So,
yeah,
okay.
Yeah. They don't do that until after they're dressed, and they don't do the super glue part till the end. But what you don't want is somebody up at the casket saying the Hail Mary and the hands fall open, or this is think of the final memory picture. You don't want the final memory picture to be traumatic, and so they set everything so it can't move. So once it's been set, the body's position will not be able to move. So cavity involvement is the next step. And this step is for removing fluid and gases from the organs. A small incision is made near the belly button with a sharp surgical instrument used for drainage. And this is called a trocar. And it's inserted into the body cavity. And this is, I don't know, a couple 2 feet, 3 feet thing with a sharp edge on it. And we'll put a picture of it in the show notes. Well, they take that and they put that in there. And then the organs in the chest cavity and the abdomen are punctured and drained of gas and fluid contents. And then that's replaced with formaldehyde-based chemical mixtures. That incision is closed. And at this point, the body is fully embalmed. All openings. I don't know what's wrong with me today, Charlie. It's like the words are not coming out. So that incision is closed, and at this point, the body is fully embalmed. All openings in the body are then plugged to prevent leaking. So if we're going for like the full thing and, like a really, really good look, the next thing they'll do is the hypodermic embalming. And this is a procedure used to inject embalming chemicals into any areas that were not reached with the other methods. It's injected with a hypodermic needle. So they take a needle, just like if you were getting Botox or fillers, ladies or men who've done that, you know what I mean? And they'll inject that in to make it look good and even things out. They also, when you go, like if you ever do a tour of the funeral home, I mean, that should be on everybody's list, but they'll show you the different chemicals they have. Mm-hmm. And they have chemicals that are like puffing chemicals so that it'll fill out your face, make you look better than you have in a lot of years. Yeah. And it's different colors, so that they use the chemicals to really enhance how the body looks. And then there's surface embalming, and this step is implemented as it's needed. Embalming fluid is applied topically. That means, rubbed onto the body in areas that have been damaged because of decomposition. When that's done, afterward, the body is washed and it's dried again, and it's ready for the hair and makeup people. And the hair and makeup piece of it is much more involved than I think, Charlie, you would ever realize. And so what we're going to do is we'll do a separate show on hair and makeup because it's really, you can be certified in this. It's a whole thing. Yeah. So I thought it would be interesting to do a separate show on that. So stay tuned, everybody. We're going to get into that. The other thing, though, I wanted to talk about in terms of embalming is green embalming. And green embalming provides a non-toxic and biodegradable solution that still preserves the body and restores its appearance. If you wish to have a body embalmed in an environmentally and healthfully safe way for the people who are still living, traditional embalming fluid can be replaced with this non-toxic, non-carcinogenic, formaldehyde-free embalming fluid, which is made from biodegradable essential oils. Not only does this protect the health of the embalmer, who's not inhaling all of these chemicals, but it also does not add harmful chemicals to the earth once the body is buried and is disintegrating. So if you're interested in green embalming, make sure that the funeral home you're working with offers this alternative. And we have some resources in our show notes about how to find green embalming and what to look for and what to ask for. So yeah, that's how they get the blood out, and that's how they put the chemicals in. Do you have any questions about that, Charlie?
A couple of things. A couple of things. So you had said it's primarily the U.S. and Canada. That embalms. What do other countries do?
Well, it depends on religion, like Hindus will cremate. So cremation is a big thing. The Jews will not embalm. They and I think also the Muslim countries do not embalm. They just wrap, they wash,
they wrap, wrap and then put in the ground? Okay. Or whatever.
And they do,
okay.
Yeah, they do. They have their own rituals.
Oh, okay.
So it's not that other countries don't do it, but the main countries that do it are the United States and Canada.
So you had mentioned with the embalming, it could range anywhere from $300, I think you said, to about $1,000. So I mean,
right.
can someone, for example, just choose to do, I don't know, makeup, as you had mentioned, and not embalm, or like only have a certain amount of embalming, or if you're in for a penny, you're in for a pound, and everything needs to be embalmed? Okay.
Either the first two steps where you're getting all the blood out, those two steps have to happen if you're going to have makeup. They're not going to do hair and makeup on an unembalmed body. So they'll embalm and then they'll do that. You can't just say, oh, I only want the arterial blood pumped out and leave the organs, just that it just doesn't work that way.
So if someone, so if, the deceased's family members or whoever's in charge of this decide to not embalm, I mean, you really couldn't have like an open casket, right? Because just the person's body would just
you can have an open casket. You can have a viewing. You don't have to be embalmed to have that. You can have your family member comb your hair and do your makeup. Do some like put some blush on and some lipstick or whatever. But it's not going to have that professional memory picture.
Yeah.
It's not going to have that professional look to it. And for some people now, it's getting less and less.
Yeah.
When we did our show about cremation is very popular,
right?
For a financial reason and lots of different reasons that we talked about. And people say, I don't want all my body, full of all those chemicals. And I don't want, like I say, I don't want people, walking through looking at me while I'm dead. So people have lots of different reasons for choosing what they're going to choose. And some people, it's really important. They need to be able to see that their loved one is peaceful and at rest. They need that memory picture. They need that last picture to say, oh, he or she looked good. So
then if there is no embalming, then I guess somebody's not going to look good. They'll look like I have this image of like a shriveled old apple or something like that.
Well, it depends on how they were when they died. I mean, if you died today, you wouldn't look like a shriveled old apple.
Oh, that's very sweet. What do you think? What do you think I would look like?
A shriveled young apple?
Well, there we are. I feel better already. Okay, got it. All right.
Not everybody who dies looks like a shriveled old apple. It's just, if COVID has taught us nothing, it's that, death doesn't discriminate.
No, it doesn't. So in our third half, our guest today is Elizabeth Fournier, who is the owner and operator of Cornerstone Funeral Services outside of Portland, Oregon, in a tiny town called Boring. When Elizabeth was 8, her mother and grandparents died. The young Elizabeth found cemeteries a place of peace and tranquility. As a teenager, she attended funerals of people she did not know. She eventually headed into the local funeral home and asked for a job, any job. Landing the position of live-in nightkeeper, she resided in a trailer in the far reaches of a large hilly cemetery. She slept with a shotgun near her bed, experiencing the scariest summer of her life. She has since dedicated her life to taking care of the dead and preparing more meaningful burials. We hope you enjoy our interview with Elizabeth.
So we're with Elizabeth today, who works in I can't remember where you are. You're up in the Northwest, right?
Yes, I'm in Oregon, in a little town called Boring.
Now, how did you get yourself all the way up there? Are you from that area?
Yes, I'm from here. And I was working at corporate funeral homes back in the day. A little tiny parlor was going to be closed down, desperately needed somebody to step in and clean everything up, and I just jumped at the chance, and that's how I got to Boring 16 years ago. So I've revamped, and now I own Cornerstone Funeral in Boring, Oregon. It's a repurposed goat barn funeral home, and I really wouldn't have it any other way.
So is it one of those Charlie and I are originally from Detroit, and for our listeners, we have a treat. Charlie's on the line, so if he jumps in, you'll know, what the heck is he doing here? Charlie doesn't often come to the interviews, so Charlie and I are both from the Detroit area, and I then moved to New England, and in New England, they're beautiful, like, Victorian mansions that have been, that are the funeral homes out there. Is that how it is in Oregon?
No, not at all. We have a lot of funeral homes and strip malls. We also have sort of standard split-level ranch-looking funeral homes. It's really rare that you see one that looks like a church or a mansion. It's really rare that you find one that somebody lives upstairs. A lot of these things are newer construction, and so having a repurposed building doesn't really seem so different. There's a lot of barns and things now that are wedding venues in Oregon. We have a little bit more of a rustic flair, so it just fits right into the happening of the zeitgeist.
We're in our series about the last hours of living. We're talking about funeral homes and cremations and embalming, and you run across or you hear people talking in a negative way about the funeral industry. And I assume that you've heard that, but why do you think that is?
Well, a lot of it would reflect on what my early experience was in the funeral industry. When I first came involved in 1990, you really had to work at a parlor where it was a full-service funeral home where there is the funeral director who's upselling caskets, and there's sales meetings going on, and then there's the cemetery side, which is going ahead and they're selling graves, headstones, what have you. So it was a different idea. I think a lot of funeral directing then was based on merchandise, was based on marketing, and we have moved through that now where families are taking back their own rights. Also, people are branching off and realizing that they don't have to be under a corporate umbrella. They sort of can do their own thing and put out their own shingle. So we have a lot of people who are coming into this work because they're not sales-centered, but they're heart-centered, and they're finding new and improved ways to help walk people through this incredible transition process.
And so how do you go about finding that, if that's what you want? I grew up in a tract housing outside of Detroit, and we people had their family funeral homes. Like, we always went to Solosky Funeral Home, and everybody, that's just where you went. And I don't think anybody ever even thought about, well, maybe there's a different way to do this. So how
people find out originally by making phone calls. I think people decide, okay, it's not like a school district where you have to go to the parlor right in your neighborhood. You actually have the right to go across town or extend that. And people have done that by just merely picking up the phone and calling and having a conversation and either having a good feeling or not. People have stopped in places when they've driven past them when they haven't had a need just to check it out. And then also of course, we don't use the yellow pages like we did anymore. We'll all just open up to my city, and I'll find the local parlor, and that's who I'm going to use. So we are out there, and you can see a lot of new and interesting funeral work on places like Instagram. So that's a really great place to go if you want to see what the millennial funeral directors are doing and see what some of the mom and pop funeral directors have morphed into, and just to really see what's out there versus just the large parlor down the street, which sort of has everything encompassed where you assume that you need to walk into.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's good advice. So if somebody comes to you, Elizabeth, how do you approach the family when they're going to plan their funeral?
If somebody drives up, or if I have an appointment, the first thing I do is I open the door. I walk outside and say hello and greet them outside. And I think that puts them at ease because most people don't have any information with a funeral director besides maybe what they see in the movies. And they think of it's going to be sort of maybe a dour, clammy-hand man in a dark suit that's going to lead them down a hallway, and it's going to be sort of a scary experience. So I come out with my sunshiny smile and say hello and welcome them in. And then they're in a room that has wonderful oversized wicker chairs and has really nice, pleasant art on the wall and a green paint color. And I think there's a little bit more of a disarmament there as well. And then when we sit down, it's not a sales presentation. It's merely asking them what they want to speak of. A lot of times I'll actually meet people in their homes. If somebody calls and says they want to talk about things, I'll say that's wonderful. In Oregon, there's so many parks and rivers that people sometimes want to meet outside. They'll want to come outside the funeral home here where I have got a wonderful tree with wind chimes and an outdoor veranda area we can sit, or they can come in. I can go to their home, whatever you want. People are very, very comfortable on their own front porch or in their own kitchen drinking coffee out of their own coffee cups. So whatever somebody needs to be able to broach this subject, I'm definitely all happy to make that happen for them.
I'm honestly surprised to hear that because I've actually never heard of a funeral director, or what's the correct term nowadays?
There's actually three. It's either funeral director, mortician, or undertaker. They're all the same thing, and then an embalmer is separate. On the West Coast, we say funeral director. I like to use the word mortician personally, and when I say undertaker, I think that's very formal and that's very old-fashioned. And people will say, well, what are you undertaking? I don't get it. So that I don't ever want to lose anybody in the translation. But I'm sort of known in my area as the undertaker of Boring, Oregon, and I think something about that sticks for people. But I would say most of us in my job are called funeral directors.
Okay. So what I was saying was it really surprises me. I've never imagined the funeral director coming to my house and chatting with me about, this idea. So I think our listeners will probably say, oh, well, that seems like that's unusual.
Yeah, it's legal. It's something that we can do. We're just talking to you about what you want, wherever you want. The beauty of a lot of the things that I'm able to do out here is I own the place, and it's just me. And so I can make the rules as I go. As long as they are legal and as long as they are ethical, I try to get families whatever the heck they want. And how I was able to develop that idea was early on working at different funeral homes where I had to do things certain ways. And I thought to myself, wow, I didn't think this is what being a funeral director was. I didn't think this is why I was called to this. And feeling like my childhood dream of what I thought my career would be wasn't. I'm definitely not a good salesperson at all, and I know that. So realizing that I'm probably in the wrong career was very disheartening for me. So when I finally had the opportunity to be able to be my own boss, I didn't take 1 second of that for granted. And so these last 16 years have been burying people in their backyards and have been encouraging people to make their own caskets out of scrap wood and all these wonderful things I would never be able to do if I had a manager or a boss or worked for someone who said that's not how we do these things.
So we have to find the Elizabeth of our own neighborhood or town or state is what you're saying, because not everybody is going to do this.
Well, and also when I worked for other places, there were a lot of great people. When I worked for other places, there also were a lot of things that I learned. I'm so thankful for my experiences because I learned a lot of things that I wouldn't have if I had this opportunity now. I'm glad I worked in a chain situation where there was a lot of different businesses and people I met and things I did because I got all that great experience, and then I was able to formulate what kind of undertaker I wanted to be and what I wanted my life work to look like. So I just was fortunate and then jumped at a chance that wasn't glamorous. It wasn't just, hey, step in here, young lady, and you can run a place. It was really a funeral home where one person a month really was passing away using the services. The roof had a leak. We were in the red financially. And everybody said, you are crazy. So, it wasn't a glamorous transition. But something told me it was the right place to be.
Right. So I know I always took my nursing students. I taught nursing for a long time, and I always took my nursing students to a funeral home when I was teaching in New Hampshire. And the funeral director there, his name was Buddy, which always made me laugh because I wasn't thinking of a funeral director named Buddy, but he was wonderful with the nursing students and showed them everything and just really explain things. But as I got to know Buddy, I also kind of heard the other side of his work in terms of car accidents and bearing children and that kind of thing. And I was wondering, what keeps you going when those circumstances are very difficult?
Well, what keeps me going is love. And that's really why we're all here. That's really all that matters, and that's why ultimately people make all the choices they do in life. It's because of love. There is something so magical, I would say, about helping somebody move through the process of death. Having just any little part on helping somebody move through grief is really amazing. And I know I can put my head on my pillow at night and think, wow, that was a good day on the job. And not because my bank account necessarily went up or not because I have an award on my wall, but because I know I said something somewhere that touched somebody's life. So that helps. Also, I have sheep and goats that I hug and kiss and brush their hair and sing mariachi to. That helps greatly. And I've got a really supportive child and a really supportive husband. So luckily, my love tank gets filled too along the way, and I love to eat. There's not much food that I can't stand. So, there's a lot of comfort and gorgeousness in that.
So you have a very healthy view of your work and see that as a gift. There was a story about Mother Teresa. I don't know if you've ever heard this. And a reporter asked her how she tolerated all the deaths every day in her work, and she said, my goal is for people to die with dignity, and everybody who I care for dies with dignity, and so I'm happy. I meet my goal all the time.
Oh, that's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that.
It sounds like that's what you do. And
I hope so.
That's heartening, and I think it's good for the listeners to know that, we have to take care of ourselves as caregivers, and that the work that we do can be nurturing and fulfilling.
Yeah, we use that word self-care, and it's a very important word, but also it doesn't always make sense to people, because people will say, great, yeah, self-care. I'd love to go do yoga a couple nights a week, but I can't get there from here because I don't know what my schedule is, or people need me, or I'm on call and it doesn't really work, or, oh, that'd be great, I'd love to have 8 hours of sleep a night, but it doesn't really happen that way. So self-care needs to be in the moment. Right now I'm sitting in my office and I have a bird feeder with some songbird food in it and also a homemade suet cake, and there's just a myriad of beautiful birds flying all over eating this. So I live so self-care while I type death certificates, while I talk to wonderful people like you hosting a podcast, while I talk to families. I have to have self-care in that moment, which is neat. So just 5 minutes to stare out a window. It's just stretching and kicking your legs in the air. It's calling a friend who's great, who has positive affirmation when you call them. It's all those things. And even getting excited about popping into the corner store to get your favorite candy bar or something. All of that really has doses of self-care.
An excellent philosophy, and I hope that our listeners are able to take that and say where can they create that for themselves, because it's really not that hard.
No,
you can do
the birds
that.
come for free. I buy them some food and there's a feeder here, but I couldn't pay all these little guys to come entertain me all day long. That's pretty neat.
It's great, isn't it? Well,
Yeah.
Elizabeth, I'm so pleased you took time out of your schedule to chat with us and to give us this insight and to, I think, give us a sort of a different view of the funeral director or the mortician that we're all going to have to talk to someday, either for someone we love or, go make our plans ahead of time. So I so appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you. Thank you.
Please stay tuned for the never-ending Sands Through the Hourglass, also known as Everyone Dies. Thank you for listening. This is Charlie Navarrete, and from Lin-Manuel Miranda's musical Hamilton, Death Does Not Discriminate.
And I'm Marianne Matzo, and we're going to see you next week. Think about all the things that you would do for love, and remember, every day is a gift.
This podcast does not provide medical advice. All discussion on this podcast, such as treatments, dosages, outcomes, charts, patient profiles, advice, messages, and any other discussion are for informational purposes only and are not a substitute for professional medical advice or treatment. Always seek the advice of your primary care practitioner or other qualified health providers with any questions that you may have regarding your health. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have heard from this podcast. If you think you may have a medical emergency, call your doctor or 911 immediately. Everyone Dies does not recommend or endorse any specific tests, practitioners, products, procedures, opinions, or other information that may be mentioned in this podcast. Reliance on any information provided in this podcast by persons appearing on this podcast at the invitation of Everyone Dies or by other members is solely at your own risk.